My name is Ian Stevens. I was born and raised a cradle Catholic. My mother and my mother's mother, my grandmother, are both very devout, strict pre-Vatican II Catholics. And my father was not, he's not Catholic. So there was a little strain in that part of in that aspect. So grew up pretty devout. I was a pretty strong, devout Catholic kid growing up all the way through public school. And what really turned it around was my parents were having troubles. I didn't know, they didn't communicate anything to the kids, me and my two sisters, about this. And one day, they were temporarily separated, thank God. And that was really the beginning of the division of my family. So I very subtly lost faith in God. I was still going to Mass, and I was still going to confession, and I was still doing all the things I really needed to do, except for praying, which I think was the most important part that I strayed away from. So my little sister kind of went AWOL. I didn't have her to go to. My older sister, she was spending time with her now husband, who was her boyfriend at the time. And I was kind of left alone. I never was like living in poverty. I was never jumping from house to house, but I did live in my father's condo for a few months, and then I decided to join the military because I was pretty lost at that time. So went to the recruiter's office for the Marine Corps, joined the Marine Corps, and things got a little shaky, I guess. It was definitely a confusing time. My relationship with my family, especially my parents, was not good. After boot camp, I guess it got a little better because we did miss each other when I was gone for 3 months and had very limited communication. But it was still shaky. There was a lot of things that were left unsaid, and there was a lot of forgiveness that needed to be fulfilled that hadn't been. So in the Marine Corps, it was extreme. It was even harder to be a devout Catholic than in public school. Talking about God and talking about the faith was just something that was completely left out of the picture. And if you did talk about it, you were almost reprimanded for it, to be completely honest. So there was a lot of mistakes that I made, and there was a lot of mistakes that I had seen been made. And in order to be a brother in the Marine Corps, you had to make those same mistakes. So I did fall into that rat hole for a little bit, and it was kind of an up and down motion for me. I was still going to church, but I was sitting there, not even listening. Sometimes I'd even take calls in the middle of Mass and just talk to people and then come back in to receive the Eucharist. It was just a very half-witted way of doing things, halfway. And so I did that for 4 years on my active duty term. And, you know, the very end was the worst. I wasn't making good decisions. But the Marine Corps is very good at keeping you busy, so you don't really think about those bad decisions you make because you're always working, you're always doing something. And when you're not doing something, you're tired. You're too tired to think about anything. So I got out of the Marine Corps, came back home. My family was doing a little better, is doing a lot better now. But I was still a mess in my head. And that's when I realized how dangerous, severe, continuous anxiety really is. And I was not eating. I was losing a whole lot of weight. I was really pale. I was vomiting blood. I had a lot of GI tract problems that was all due to panic attacks and anxiety and depression combination. It was just, I knew it was because I was living without God. And then one day, what my main conversion story was, or reversion story was, I was sitting on my sister's porch, and it was about 6 p.m. in the summer, so the sun was, actually it was about 7 p.m., 7:30. So the sun was kind of setting. I just remember it being evening, and I was in so much pain. I was in so much spiritual pain and physical pain, psychological pain. And I remember sitting there, bawling my eyes out, and then finally, for some reason, I just decided to cover my eyes like this with my arm. And I did that for hours. I did that for a little bit. I started praying, and believe it or not, I saw Our Lady, and she appeared to be like a negative picture, if that makes sense. It wasn't how normal visionaries see her. And I remember her being very, very sad and very upset that I was upset and that I was in a lot of pain. This wasn't a happy vision. I mean, it was miraculous, but it wasn't something to be ecstatic about, if that makes sense. So as I was communicating with her through, something other than words, feelings, at that moment, I gaffed it off. I was like, there's no way that just happened. I'm sick, I'm delusional, I'm hallucinating, this isn't real. And then what happened right after that, my dad's best friend died of cancer about 10 years ago. I haven't thought about this guy since. His name's Jim Howe. And it was almost like an out-of-body experience with my eyes still closed. I saw him come behind me. He wore the exact same clothes, yellow polo, old man white shoes and some khaki shorts. And he knelt down behind me. He put his hand on my shoulder and started praying with me. And that's when I realized, okay, this is real. But it wasn't something. At that time, it felt normal to me. It was something that really comforted me because I was in so much pain, and all that pain was basically numbed from this divine miracle that was happening to me at the time. So that's when I realized that, okay, something must happen to me. I accepted it in my heart at the time especially, and I prayed with him. And then I also forgot to mention that I do have a devotion to Padre Pio, a pretty strong devotion to him for several reasons, and I have for years before this even happened. And then as I was covering my eyes, I looked up like this to the corner of my sister's patio, and I saw Padre Pio, pretty much how I saw the Blessed Mother over here. He was in his Capuchin friar, and I saw his chastity belt, and he was just staring at me because he's a very, very strict priest when he was alive here. And he was basically looking at me like, get up, you're stronger than this, knock it off, and go back to the faith. And I still think about it, and I mean, he was right. He kind of slapped reality into me. And so yeah, that basically changed my life. And honestly, ever since that day, I've been praying my rosary basically daily. I don't want to say every day because I know I have skipped some days. There's no reason why I skip church on Sundays. There's just absolutely no reason. I try to be strict. I don't try to be Padre Pio strict because I know that it can probably come off as arrogant for those of you that do know his life and how he was in confession and how he was at absolving people. He was very, very strict and very real, and he made you be real as well. So some people say I'm a little too aggressive, but I do that for me. I do that for my sake because I have to be aggressive with myself. So sometimes I project that outwardly, and it comes off as arrogant. So I do need to relax. But that's basically my story. And hopefully I inspired a lot of you. For those of you who are viewing this and for those of you who are listening, please pray your rosary. It is the strongest weapon we have. And remember me in your prayers. And God bless.